Amid mounting security fears, European states closest to Russia are now quietly discussing how they might someday build their own nuclear deterrence, breaking a taboo that has held since the Cold War ended. These talks mark Europe's first serious debate on independent nuclear options since the end of the Cold War, reflecting deep anxiety over whether existing guarantees are still enough. According to Bloomberg, the conversations are happening in tight bilateral and trilateral formats at deep military levels, often below the political surface and out of public view. The countries involved tend to host US bases and feel directly exposed to Russia's vast arsenal, making them especially nervous about any wobble in Washington's commitment. Bloomberg reported that the trigger for this rethinking was Washington's brief March 2025 halt in sharing combat intelligence with Ukraine, a pause that sent shockwaves through European capitals. Europe watched Kiev suffer immediate battlefield setbacks during that outage, and many leaders began to fear that the US might no longer be a fully reliable security anchor. Europe's current strategic deterrent rests largely on US nuclear weapons and NATO's Article 5 pledge, a structure that assumes Washington will always show up in a crisis. The brief intel cutoff forced European governments to imagine a Home Alone scenario with Russia, where US backing might arrive late, or not at all. Notably, Russia holds the world's largest nuclear arsenal, a fact that amplifies these fears and makes any doubt about Allied support feel existential. Within Europe itself, only France and the United Kingdom possess nuclear weapons, concentrating the continent's independent deterrent in just 2 capitals. In March 2025, French President Emmanuel Macron openly called Russia a direct threat and urged a continent-wide debate on European nuclear protection. Macron floated the idea of extending France's nuclear umbrella to cover more European partners, hinting that Paris could someday shield not just France but parts of the EU. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk quickly echoed those calls, arguing that Europe must arm itself more robustly against Moscow and reduce its dependence on American decisions. The Kremlin blasted Macron's stance as extremely confrontational and misleading, accusing Paris of stoking nuclear tensions instead of calming them. Pavel Podvig said, and I quote, "Imagine that Russia invades Estonia. So, France has this calculation, they have the capability to do a lot of damage to Russia, but Russia would definitely do a lot of damage to France in response. Would that be something Paris would be willing to contemplate?" Unquote. However, experts warn that most EU states simply cannot afford to replace the US nuclear umbrella on their own, given the colossal costs of building and sustaining such forces. The UK and France together spend around $12 billion a year just to keep roughly 400 nuclear warheads operational and ready. Interestingly, that combined nuclear bill alone equals more than half of Sweden's entire annual defense budget, underscoring how expensive deterrence really is. Notably, France and the UK together field about 400 deployed warheads, a fraction of what the United States keeps at its disposal. Meanwhile, the United States fields roughly 1,670 deployed strategic warheads, a massive gap that could widen further now that the New START treaty has expired. Doria Dolzakova said, and I quote, "I don't see a pan-European nuclear deterrent. I don't think that's feasible. What I do think there is room to do is ask, how do the French and the British think about their own domestic deterrence, and how does that affect European security?" Unquote. NATO chief Mark Rutte has repeatedly insisted that the United States remains fully committed to defending its allies, trying to steady nerves as nuclear questions resurface. US officials say Washington has not discussed ending its nuclear umbrella over Europe, and that extended deterrence remains firmly in place. According to sources, Trump has mainly talked about Europe taking on more conventional defense burdens, not about walking away from its nuclear guarantees. Macron is expected to outline a more detailed nuclear vision this year, after consultations with advisors on how French forces might factor into a broader European shield. Meanwhile, Europe already spends more than $530 billion a year on conventional defense, a huge sum that still does not buy an independent nuclear triad. For now, Europe's Plan B looks less like new EU-branded bombs and more like tighter coordination between French and British deterrents to quietly strengthen the shield around the continent.
25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.
पच्चीस करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.